hanging out with somebody really special today, Steve Siegel. We're talking about from the prosecutor's office down to like VP of this super large company and now running his own big time foundation, the High Caliber Career Transition. He's here to help you transition. Everybody, it is yours truly, once again, the corporate security translator and the author of So You Want to Get Into Corporate Security. Hanging out with somebody really special today, Steve Siegel. We're talking about from the prosecutor's office down to like VP of this super large company and now running his own big time foundation, the High Caliber Career Transition. He's here to help you transition. That's what it's about. What's up, Steve? How are you, buddy?
Carlos, great to be here. Thank you for having me be a part of everything that you do to help our brothers and sisters in law enforcement.
Well, it's what you do too, man. That's why it's exciting, man. I'm so excited to have you here with the High Caliber Career Transition company that you kind of kicked off and started, man. This is really exciting for a lot of the folks that are out there. And I'm telling you guys right now, listen, ladies, gentlemen, if you are transitioning, you got to reach out to Steve, man, because Steve is going to be able to help you through all of that process. So reach out. If you're listening, grab a pen and paper. We're about to kick this thing off. So I don't want to slow this party down, Steve. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of and how you got to even what you know where you are today, and then and let's kick it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carlos. So actually, I started off in the corporate world. So I made a transition initially from the corporate world into law enforcement, and then ultimately, as you know, made another transition back into the corporate world. But investigations was my interest, an area of passion, something I always wanted to do as a young boy. And I was fortunate enough to have been able to get into that position, and I came to work at a fairly large prosecutor's office here in New Jersey as a detective. Did a whole host of different types of investigations along the way. My bread and butter was white-collar crime and corruption and official misconduct, but I got to dabble in some other areas as well, to do our traditional organized crime investigations, which, you know, we have a smattering here in New Jersey, just a little bit of organized
just a
crime.
little bit, I've heard,
Just a touch. And so I got to do some interesting wiretaps and listen in on what was going on in these organizations. Is quite interesting. I was a narcotics supervisor for a couple of years, and we did some pretty intense narcotics investigations, seized a lot of drugs, had the benefit of being promoted through the ranks, became a sergeant, and then ultimately lieutenant. During the course of my time as a lieutenant, I oversaw a special prosecutions unit and a high-tech crime unit, all of our computer forensics. We had undercover cops working in chat rooms, picking up, you know, predators along the way, some really cool stuff, really important stuff, I should say.
Right.
And then ultimately promoted to the rank of captain, you know, because every blind mouse ultimately finds a piece of cheese, as they say.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate, but, you know, got out of the investigations part, mostly in supervising investigations, but I also had the opportunity while I was at the prosecutor's office to be involved in a hiring process. And I've conducted over 100 detective candidate interviews. So that gave me a little bit of a perspective of what it's like to be on the other side of that interview desk when things are going on.
Right.
Then ultimately, if you want me to continue, get out into the corporate world for a small insurance company here in New Jersey doing claims fraud investigations. Did that for a couple of years, and then an opportunity came about for a big bump in compensation to go work for a major financial institution, a global one at that. Did some internal investigations of fraud and external investigations of fraud against our company. And because I'm not very good at holding a job, went back to the insurance world, and where I presently am as well as conducting my business. So I work as an internal investigator, again, for a global insurance carrier, doing fraud investigations, robbery, corruption, kickbacks. So back to what I was passionate about that I had missed out on in the latter years as a supervisor at the prosecutor's office. I just wanted to get back and be able to do some of that stuff again. And very fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, and then you kind of have this idea of high caliber, the career transition, and you're like, well, let me, what happened? What was in your heart, man, that made you want to throw something like that together to help others?
Well, I was always very, passionate about helping people. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got into law enforcement, is particularly white collar crime, to help out victims that were, victimized by people
Right.
in that regard. And that just kind of carried over when I got into the corporate world. And I knew I was going to get there someday. And I was planning for that way back early on in my career. I saw a lot of the obstacles, a lot of the landmines, a lot of the learning curve that had to be met in order to make that transition successfully. So once I went through that a couple of times, I began to say that, I could impart this knowledge, I can impart this experience to my colleagues, to my friends who were ultimately making those same transitions. So I did that for a couple of years. I just free of charge, helping people, and I got to study the craft, if you will. Got to the point where I said, this is something I could parlay into a business, and ultimately leave the corporate world and do this in my latter years of semi-retirement, and continuing to help people and being away from the 9-to-5 jobs. So I got to the point where my skill set, my knowledge base was such that I felt that I could bring value to others for a fee, and that's when I established High Caliber Career Transitions.
And that's
very proud of the name. Took me a long time to come up, but I spent more time on the name than anything else. But
that's
proud
pretty awesome. Yeah, it's funny because you're saying it. I'm like, I don't want to work for the man anymore either, man. How do I do that? And that's pretty cool. But I wanted to go back a little bit then, Steve, in your history, because look, you're working for the prosecutor's office, you're a captain, and now you're thinking about, hey, what am I going to do after this? Because there is a life, after law enforcement, which a lot of people don't know, or they forget until sometimes it's too late. And I usually tell people, hey, you got to kick this thing off like 5 years or so before you're going to retire, and then 3 years, and then 2, and then 1, as you're retiring. There's a lot of things that you need to do. What was your thought when you were transitioning? Did you already know that you were going to do it, or you're like, it's just a year into, like, before you left, you're like, man, I better start thinking about something?
Well, I knew early on that there was going to be life after law enforcement. I didn't know how long I was going to stay, 25, maybe 30, but I was planning from the jump of making some sort of transition. And that's, and I had the idea that, this white collar crime thing was something, probably the best area in terms of law enforcement investigations that you can use to get into the corporate world. So I made the most of that, got as much time doing that kind of thing and supervising those kind of investigations. Went ahead and got my certification as a certified fraud examiner along the way. But it was always in my mind, what can I do to set myself up for this type of transition early on? And that would be a kind of a plan A. Actually, plan A was to be a trained engineer, but plan A didn't actually work out.
Right.
I wanted to do something completely different. I felt for a while that I didn't necessarily have to do the same thing. Train engineer sounded nice. I love trains. I know some people who do that. That just didn't work out. So I then went back into the corporate world and with the white collar crime and fraud investigations.
Well, so now, you get into this thing, you retire, you get into the corporate world, and usually there's this learning curve that you talked about. You're like, oh, Lord, now who knew that it was quite different? Or some people can easily go into it, but, there's a lot of folks, it's a high learning curve there. What was it like for you? What were some of the things that when you came in to that world, you're like, ooh, I did not know about this?
Yeah, and there was lots of them for sure. And I didn't, I wish I knew what I knew now back then, right? Back in 2010 when I was making this transition. But as you know, it's like night and day. It's, it's a mission driven in law enforcement, and it's metrics driven in the corporate world. And everything is about metrics and the budget and the bottom line. You're either a cost center or you're a revenue center. But some of the biggest things also was the enormity of these entities that I was working for, global entities that are operating in 50, 60, 100 countries around the world, with employees ranging anywhere from 25,000 to 150,000. To try and understand the landscape and where I had to go for this information or that information, understanding all the different systems that you had to learn, getting involved with, compliance, HR, legal, all the line of business stakeholders, everybody you had to kind of satisfy, provide value to along the way. So navigating that landscape was really difficult. And then understanding that I'm a cost center. Most people who work in security are deemed to be cost centers. centers, investigations, the same thing. And I needed to deliver value, and that's what we do. We look to deliver value to our customers, and our customers are essentially all the lines of business that we service. So that's a whole different perspective than in law enforcement, when you just, again, you have a mission, no one necessarily cares about metrics and how long you have cases open, or, whether you're saving money or spending money. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that. So you're talking about moving to a company. And by the way, everybody, please go to LinkedIn. All right, go see Steve out there, Steve Siegel, CFI. And then you can see his resume on that. It's incredible. And but you're right. When you work for like the prosecutor's office, a lot of times you're thinking about maybe just some state law stuff, what's going on in that state, or maybe you're working with some feds on some other things, whatever the case may be. For the most part, a lot of it U.S. driven. It's interesting that you say that, because when you go to a global company like the one that you went to, all of a sudden you got to deal with HR issues that are international. You got to deal with laws that are international, approaches that are international, how to deal with data and data privacy that is international, right? The way you investigate or interview someone in the corporate world, because that's what we do.
We don't interrogate.
That's right. That's right. We do interviews. Even learning that right there, that you do interviews, you don't do interrogations, right? But those things are all big. So that's a great point. If you're transitioning from law enforcement into the corporate world, you have to understand now you're not only working with your little county statutes or city ordinances or state, when you go into a global company, you have to really bring in your global mind to the game. It's not just your local stuff, man. Great. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, when you're dealing with employees, obviously employees have rights that are more extensive than what criminals sometimes do. And you have to be mindful of them. And we don't interrogate employees. And we can't necessarily go, like here in the U.S., I could go and look at emails of employees without any issue. I get approval from my legal advisor, right. But I can't do that in some other countries. In some other countries, you're not even permitted to interview or question an employee on a matter. There's vast differences in that, and you don't want to go afoul of any of those regulations, whether it be the HR, the legal, employees' rights, because that's big trouble.
Absolutely, and that's part of that learning curve. That's part of that learning curve, because it's extremely important for you to know. So you can't just go out there and do what you used to do as a cop, because it works differently in a corporation. Definitely works different in a corporation all over the world. I mean, Europe, if you have cameras anywhere, it's like a nightmare to deal with cameras in Europe, because they just they don't like that stuff. So no, very, very interesting stuff. But you go from there, and then you said, okay, maybe this didn't work for me, or it wasn't something that I was looking for, or just a new opportunity or something like that. And then you moved on to where'd you go after that?
So after my first job out of law enforcement, I went to a big financial institution for a big compensation package, and I admittedly made a mistake, because I found that environment there in that particular industry, which happens to be banking, and I'm not going to name the company, was kind of stressful. It was kind of toxic. Yeah. It really didn't allow me to do investigations from A to B. It was a matter of doing as little as you can, file a SAR, move on. You were getting 60 or more cases a month to handle. It was impossible to actually do much of an investigation. So it wasn't very gratifying in that respect. So I then went back to the insurance industry, where as an internal investigator, the caseload is much lower, but you have an opportunity to work it from the beginning to the very end, carry it out as far as you can go, and get some satisfaction out of it. So that was the main reason for moving back, and also to have that quality work-life balance going on is important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a pointer that I always give to folks, Steve, and I'm sure you do too as well. It's go find out the culture of a company first. You get on LinkedIn, talk to somebody that works for that company. Maybe they're doing the same job that you're going to be doing, or you want to be doing. Find out about the culture, how they move, how they talk, what are the work level, what are the stressors, what are not, what is it that you're doing? And that's extremely important, because moving just for money, and by the way, Steve, I've been there as well. By the way, I've taken a job just because there's more money. For me to a year and so later to say, what did I do? Actually, it didn't even take a year for me. It was probably about 4 months that I said, oh, Lord, I think I made a mistake. I should have stayed with the devil that I knew, but the money was there. So finding out what the culture of a business that you want to go into. It could be biopharm, banking, tech industry, hospitality, whatever the case may be, is extremely important.
Absolutely. And, everybody paints a nice rosy picture of their culture in the annual report, the 10K report. But really, to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, you need to talk to people who are there. You need to hook up with people on LinkedIn. You need to look at the reviews that are taking place on places like Glassdoor, see what people are saying about the company, who are both not. I understand, take them with a grain of salt. If they're former employees, they may be a little bit soured, but you want to get a hold of people also who are working there, but more specifically, even in working in your area where you want to work, because the culture can be different from one line of business to another completely. And the culture can rest solely with how that manager is towards their employees. You can get down to that granular level. Whereas that same culture would be great if another manager was in charge. But with this particular manager, this is what's going on. This is what he expects, or he or she expects, and this is the kind of environment you'll be facing working under that. And they say people don't usually leave companies; they leave managers. Right?
I've heard of that. This one particular company, I had 4 managers in a year. 1 year, 4 managers. It's difficult to figure out how you're going to do business with that. So, and it happens.
And like you, I realized it early on. Months in, I realized it, but then you're stuck, right? It's not easy to get out all the time, right?
No, you're right, man. You're right.
And you don't want to be that guy who's like jumping around from place to place. You want to give it an ample time. Maybe things will change, but
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people that come from the law enforcement industry, they always want to do the right thing, and they really want to give everybody an opportunity and a try, and including companies, and sometimes, there is such a thing. That's where I learned, Steve, that there is a real thing called just not a fit, because I interview a lot of people with the position I hold and I've held in some other companies. And, they come to me and they say, yeah, it wasn't a fit. And I get it. I get it now more than ever.
Yeah, and that comes down to the characteristics, the personality, the soft skills, if you will, that really kind of make it a fit or not a lot of times as well, not just the hard skills of the workload. It's the dynamics among the group, the team, the manager, other lines of business. What kind of dynamic? How are you looked upon as a person? How is your unit looked upon as a unit in the eyes of other lines of business within that same company? So there's a lot of dynamics, and it's constantly fluctuating and changing. And it may be good at one time, and it may go bad, or it may be bad and get good. People change, managers change, and there's sometimes opportunity for you to change and get into another area and stay within that same company. That also is a way of changing.
Yeah, absolutely. But you brought something that I thought was really interesting. I even took a note here, man, which is key. Whenever I have a problem with someone that kind of transitions from law enforcement, it's the soft skill is one of the issues that I come across, where they're great. They understand, the mission. They're all about the team, but they just don't have the soft skills to lead other folks. When you're talking to folks through, the high caliber career transition, is that something that you talk about, being able to gain those soft skills, or something that's important for corporations?
I did talk about that extensively. It's very important. First of all, companies would be more inclined to hire someone who has the personality traits and the soft skills, and not have so much of the hard skills, because they can teach them the hard skills. But if it's just the opposite, everything in the world and you're a perfect fit for that job in terms of your hard skills, and you don't have the soft skills that go along with it, you don't have a chance. Right. Because they're not going to accept you. They want to be around people who, the hiring manager wants to be able to work around you, and they want their colleagues to be able to work around you. So your soft skills and how you're going to be is important. And I stress that sometimes, people in law enforcement have those stereotypes and obstacles to have to overcome in the interview process, as I personally did. Even if you're applying for a law enforcement related position, even in my position when I was in my current role, I was applying for a fraud investigator position well within my wheelhouse. I was up against 2 other attorneys for the position. attorneys.
Wow.
And it was such that the hiring manager was an attorney. And it turns out that the prior hiring manager was a person from law enforcement who really wasn't treating people well. And he got canned. So now the company is soured on law enforcement a bit. And I've seen that elsewhere in companies, in my first company, where law enforcement people came and went. And then the perception of those was that they're not going to stay very long. They could easily leave. They're not loyal. So I would argue to people that you have these stereotypes that you might have overcome. Number one is are you going to play well with others, right? Are you going to fit into the culture? Are you going to interrogate their employees? Are you going to be a liability? Are you going to be arrogant? Are you going to be able to take direction from someone who's half your age, especially if you've been a supervisor or chief? Yeah. And of course, are you going to be quick to leave when things get rough because you have that nice cushy pension underneath you? So, I mean, those are real obstacles that I discuss with my clients and make them aware of it. Because again, I faced that in a law enforcement type of position, and you may be going to make a completely different transition into a company who maybe is not even familiar with or has ever hired someone from law enforcement before, and they're going to really have those same stereotypes and unknowns and those things going on in their heads as well.
Steve, I love the honesty, man. I love the honesty because I can feel that you're not just trying to make money or anything like that. You're being honest and you're being pure and to the point on some of the things that are lacking today, and some law enforcement folks that are coming into the corporate world. I'm going to add one more to that too, and it's understanding even security systems. It's like you said, it's apple and oranges. So a lot of people that come from the law enforcement world don't know about access control systems, don't know about camera hardware and camera software and intrusion detection systems, and being able to go out there and actually learn, go to these like Linnell Secure classes and learn what is it? What is access control? What is an access camera compared to a Bosch camera and all these other things. So it's the soft skill, being able to pass the old adage that, some people just don't, like you were saying, understand or trust law enforcement folks that are coming in. But then also when you interview, being prepared technically to be able to answer some of the technical questions.
Right. And, it's to the extent where I make sure that I kind of immerse my clients in what it's like to work in the corporate world. And it may come out of that discussion that, hey, this is not a place for me. I don't want to live in this metrics-driven world where my hours are going to be calculated every 15 minutes or how many cases I complete or this or that. And it's great if they come to that realization early on, because you'd rather have it come at that time than get into the field, find out it's not right for you, and then having wasted all that time and effort to make that transition, so know what you're getting into, and understand it's going to be a chore. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be different.
You mentioned something too a little bit earlier. I took a quick note of it. You're right. You're retiring as a chief or a captain, major, whatever the case may be in your law enforcement career, and now you got to start over. And I try to tell a lot of people too, Steve, that you're literally starting over. It's a brand new kind of line of business. I mean, you may understand some of the concepts of it, but a lot of it are going to be brand new. So are you going to be humble enough to learn from somebody that's half your age? Are you going to be humble enough to sit there and listen to criticism that you might not have had as a executive in law enforcement, because now you're starting over again? Do you also cover that with everybody there at High Caliber?
Absolutely. And it comes from not only being in a place of position in law enforcement, now going to a place where you may not be in charge, but it also has to do with your age too, right? Sometimes we can get discriminated upon. We're coming out of our jobs in our 50s, or you're making transitions in the 50s, maybe even in your 60s. So there's those preconceived notions again about that. So it's important to be able to explain to realize that kind of thought process may be out there, and you need to be able to show that you're energetic. You need to be able to show that you're coachable. You need to be able to show that you're willing to learn, as if you were 18 years old and starting your very first job. You need to display that kind of soft skills, that kind of character for those positions, for sure.
I tell people all the time, be positive. In every interaction, smile, be positive, because if you spend 20, 25 years, in law enforcement world, you might get a little jaded. You know,
Yeah.
you see a lot of things, and you don't trust or believe anybody, and then here you are in a corporation, you know, and then you got to be positive, stay positive, walk positive.
Absolutely, because we developed that us versus them attitude, and now we're working about them. Right? You know, I mean, who do cops mainly hang out with and socialize with? Other cops, you know, because they understand that there's no brotherhood like that anywhere in the corporate world.
Yeah.
For sure, I can tell you that. When somebody, when a CEO dies, you know, the hundreds of CEOs are not lined up to honor that person's legacy, like we do in law enforcement when those tragic events happen. So that brotherhood is not quite there either. You know, that way it used to be.
That's interesting. So we got about 5 minutes left, and there was one thing that I realized that a lot of folks, when they leave law enforcement, it's almost like law enforcement leaves them. It's almost over. The people that used to talk to every single day, a lot of times don't reach out to you as much anymore. Or a lot of, I've had that from some law enforcement folks, including myself. I mean, when I spent a couple of years as a cop, when I left to just go back to the corporate world, because I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing. It almost like, man, I got cut out. Like, people didn't want to talk to me anymore because I wasn't part of the brotherhood in that way. Have you ever come across that, or is this little old me and some of the folks I know?
No, you know, I was always one who tries to stay in touch with, you know, the brotherhood. I maintain my existence in many different agencies outside of here, both social and professional related agencies. But there's some who just drop off the face of the map and you never see them again. You wonder what happened to them. But so I do experience that a little bit as well.
Gotcha. So here we go. High caliber career transition. Hanging out with Steve. Steve, so we got a couple minutes left.
Okay.
This thing goes by quick. It goes by quick.
It does.
So leave folks with a couple of things that they need to be thinking about as they're transitioning, and then how do they get a hold of you at the end? Let's do it.
Okay, sure. So a couple of points I like to make. First of all, it's very little about what you've done. You know, the past is the past, but it's everything about what you can do. That's all the employers care about. What do you bring to the table? What can you do for them going forward? So past accomplishments don't necessarily equal into future performance. Past behavior does. So if they deem that you don't have the soft skills, the character, that's going to carry through, and they're going to believe that that's going to carry through into your role there. And I would also stress that, you know, you need to be not a job seeker. You don't go into these interviews as a job seeker. You have to go in as a problem solver. You're like the doctor analyzing their problem, and you're going to be the solution for their problem. That's number two. And again, with job hunting too, I like to stress, and I make an analogy to people who are hunting. If you have a choice of hunting prey, and you have the choice of going to a place where you have a 20% chance of getting prey versus a chance of another place where you might get 80% chance of succeeding, where are you going to hunt? You would naturally spend your efforts in a place where you have an 80% chance. Yet most job seekers spend their efforts seeking jobs that are posted online and thinking that that's the most efficient and effective way in getting employment. And you're hunting in the wrong place if you're just doing that. And that's where 95% of the other hunters are along with too. So that makes it even worse.
Oh, man. Absolutely. I love that past behavior, future performance, right? I love that idea. And you're right. And the problem solver, if you can come in an interview with Carlos and you can show me that you're going to be my problem solver, I can get you in. I can get you in.
Yeah. You come from a position of strength, of offering something, not wanting something from them, right?
Yeah.
And you need to look at yourself as a product, man. You're a product, no different than a can of Coke or a flat screen TV or a car, and you need to sell it. You know, you have to think of yourself as that car salesman, and the sticker is the window sticker is your resume, and it only talks about your hard skills. It gives you some nice specifications, what the features are. But if you want to sell yourself, you want to sell that car, you got to get into the emotion. You got to appeal to the emotion. You got to let them sit in the car and smell it, feel the leather seats, drive it, listen to the music. Make them be able to visualize you in that role, just as you want to visualize yourself in that car driving out of that showman and driving that every day. You're a product, and you got to realize you got to sell yourself like that.
That's it. Steve for president. You can be my coach, Steve. I'm ready, buddy. I'm ready to be coached. This is
So
great.
for those who would love to, and I would love to hear from you, be of service to you, be of value to you, give back. And we do donate a portion of our proceeds to law enforcement and military charities. And every client has a vote in where that money goes. But it's all about giving back. But please seek me out online at www.h as in Harry, C like in Charlie, hyphen, C like in Charlie, T like in Tango.com. High caliber career transitions, and I'll be happy to speak with you, and we'll get you where you want to go.
I love it. And I'll make sure that link is going to be on there for everybody, Steve, and make sure everybody please connect with Steve. This is really good stuff.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Here. This is what it is, man, to give back to the community. Let's give a big clap for Steve for doing that. You are outstanding, my friend.
You got a big audience there.
So we'll catch you. We'll catch you next time, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Pleasure
Once again.
Good luck, everybody. Stay safe.
There you go. The corporate security translator here, and the author. So you want to get into corporate security? Steve Siegel hanging out with us. High caliber career transition. Go find him on LinkedIn and click on the link that I'm going to set right below. We'll see everybody.
Thank you, Carlos.
Take care. All right.
Take care now. Bye. Be safe.